Hello, and welcome back to the Test Drive Podcast, brought to you by Sport Car USA. I'm your host, Lee Bodette. Here at Sport Car USA, we love all things fast. From stock Corvettes to tuned-up Hellcats, we love it all. So buckle up and come for a ride on this week's episode of Test Drive. Well, hi there, everyone. Welcome to our Test Drive Podcast, number 24. I'm Lee Bodette, your host. I've been a radio broadcaster for over 40 years. I host the series called Test Drive on the YouTube channel. I'm the front man and host of Sport Car USA, and of course, a car enthusiast my entire life. With me from Sport Car USA is Scott Nickerson. Hello, Scott.
How's it going, Lee?
It's going great. It's going great, except it's raining.
The weather's been awful this summer, which,
Yeah. I mean, if you've been listening to our podcast, it seems like all we talk about is rain.
It's the rain. We're going to be weathermen after this.
I've been in Vermont my entire life, a lifelong Vermonter, and I cannot recall a summer as bad as this when it comes to rain.
Yeah, and it sucks for us, too, because we don't want to take these cars out in the rain. So it shortens the already short Vermont sports car season. So
yeah, and Sport Car USA conducts, I guess, what is it, 4 or 5?
Yeah, 4.
Four car shows, if you will. We call them showcases, where we clear the dealerships out of the cars on the lot with Toyota and Chevy in St. Albans, Vermont. We've had one in May, and the others have all been canceled. As a matter of fact, as we broadcast today on the 18th of August, today was supposed to be one of another car shows here at the Handy campus, if you will. We had to cancel that because it's pouring out right now.
Yep. Luckily, we worked some rain dates in this time. So next Friday, hopefully, by the time you're hearing the next podcast, it is good news and that we are having our showcase. But yeah, the weather is relentless so far this summer.
Yeah, we actually had a rain date of tomorrow, but tomorrow doesn't look great either. And we finally said, you know what, the hell with it. We're going to do our last one on the 25th of August, and it's going to be rain or shine. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, we can't afford to not do one. We've pushed it back so far, and they're honestly one of my favorite things that we do, you and I, Lee. So
yeah, it is a lot of fun, and I got to tell you, the Sport Car USA family, even though we've only had one showcase this year, we're all burned out.
Yeah,
and we haven't had any except that one.
It's a long summer. I mean, like I was saying to you the other day, it's kind of like an adrenaline dump. Yeah. You get like hyped up and ready for the show, and then we usually call it the day before. So then you're like, oh, all that like anticipation and preparing, and you got to push to next week. So
yeah. So now
it'll be good.
All our eggs in one basket, as they say, coming up this Friday, the 25th in St. Albans. It'll be a showcase of the season and wrapping that up for the year. Then we have other events that we're going to as well, right? Yeah,
we have just 2 more. We're kind of towards the tail end of the season, maybe 3 more, depending on if they take us to SEMA. But we have the show in Lake George, the Adirondack Nationals, the first weekend of September, second weekend of September. Right. And then the week after that, we have the NSRA show in Essex. It's at the Champlain Valley Expo. And then we're going to be doing a cruise for that. So we'll probably have an entire podcast episode that Friday that is dedicated to meeting the people that are part of that cruise.
Definitely looking forward to those big events.
Yep.
And last weekend, let's recap a little bit. We attended the 66, easy for you to say, Vermont Auto Enthusiast Antique and Classic Car Meet in Waterbury, Vermont. And that was quite a show.
Yeah, and the rain does come into play in that one as well. But we got lucky. Friday, we did. Thursday was our setup day. We drove down a GT500, a 2007, and we drove down our 96 Firebird, which I got to drive, and it's actually pretty smooth.
I'm just saying, it's a pretty straight car.
Yeah, it's as old as I am. And it drove relatively smooth. I was kind of comfortable the whole way there. It's like sofas as far as the front seats go. They're not like modern seats. They're very comfortable.
Yeah, those cars get a lot of looks this past weekend. Saturday was the big day. That's where they get the best attendance. Weather was okay. Scott and I did a number of interviews, some of which you're going to be hearing during this podcast number 24. We went out to do some interviews. It was hot and sticky, and then it started to rain for about 60 seconds.
Yeah, not long. There's, I think, 1 or maybe 2 interviews that you can see little bits of rain falling, but it wasn't heavy. And then after that, it cleared, and we got some more interviews in the sun, and then it was very humid.
It was, yes. No,
it was like just enough rain to make it humid. But I mean, that's lucky. I think what people were expecting was that it was going to be raining through the whole weekend.
Right.
And you could see that there was a little bit less attendance, I think.
Absolutely.
There was still lots of people there. Obviously, it's a huge show, but I think there would have been more if the weather had been nice, projected for the whole weekend.
Yeah, and during that minute of rain that we did have, the light rain, as Scott mentioned, you could see all the car owners just running to their vehicles and covering them up the best they could with tarps, and
people with convertibles were scrambling.
Oh my goodness. And then nothing materialized from it, and it ended up being a pretty good day, but as you said, very humid.
Yeah. But it was fun. We got to talk to some cool people, and we got lots of interviews where towards the end of our walkthrough, we talked to a guy who had a Bronco, and that's kind of towards the end of these interviews. And we got to see his really cool paint color actually in the sun for a little bit.
Yeah, so. What is it? Cranberry wine or some not cranberry. Oh, he mentioned it.
Cherry? No, not cherry.
No, brandy. Is it brandy?
Something like it's got
it's amazing color.
It's kind of like a candy apple.
Yeah.
It's a candy paint.
Right.
So he said there was a silver underneath, and then there's like the red on top, and it's just really, really beautiful.
This Vermont Auto Enthusiast Antique and Classic Car Show is obviously one of the largest in New England, if not the largest. We had Wendell Noble on from the VAE, the podcast before this one, I believe it was, and these cars come from all over New England, all over the country, really. They trailer them in, and we saw some real beauties. You mentioned the Bronco. Which vehicle, Scott, would you say was your favorite? Or do you have one? That's a tough question.
That's tough because there's all kinds of stuff there where on one side of the road, you remember we had all those like hot rod or street rods or whatever it was.
Street rods.
Or like race cars
race
almost.
Cars.
And then there's the classics. I'm not huge into the classics. Some of those are just big boats.
Yeah.
There's definitely some boats there.
Big Impalas and Cadillacs.
I think the thing that I liked the most was the thing that was running around all day. A guy had a steam engine vehicle.
Right.
I don't know if you were there for that.
I was.
But you could hear it like whistling a little bit as it drove around. Yeah. It's cool. I don't think I don't know if I've seen a steam engine vehicle before that, and it's just kind of interesting. And they move.
They really do.
He was going pretty quick.
Yeah. One interview that we did have, we had what vehicle was that where they hit the horn and scared the hell out of it?
Oh, I don't know if you'll be able to see it because I put a little bit of stabilization on it in the editing, but I was looking at the footage, and when he hit the horn the first time, you could see the camera like jump because I wasn't expecting it to be that loud.
That was a great interview. Again, it's upcoming in this podcast because the couple gave us a history on the Cadillac.
Yeah.
And one of the forefathers of Cadillac lives in Barton, Vermont, or did live in Barton, Vermont. Nobody knew it.
Right.
I didn't know about this guy, but
he flew under the radar.
Just a really interesting story.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So, yeah. We even had a Hot Wheel competition going on with the kids. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah, the VAE does a really good job. I mean, like we said in last week's interview, they do a lot of educational stuff.
Yeah.
So they had what Wendell previewed was the tech tent. And the tech tent was there. I even went around and checked it out. And they had like cutaways of that sleeve. I cannot think of the name, but it was like a sleeve engine. So you could turn a crank and you could see the pistons move and all that stuff.
Yeah.
They had just an array of different car parts and old things that you could actually touch and play with. And I think that's good to get kids involved. Yeah. Because it is kind of a dying art with those things. So.
Right. And after that weekend, I've had my fill of cider donuts.
Oh, they were so good, though.
They were so good. They had these little mini cider donuts, and you could only get 12. 12 was the minimum purchase.
Yeah.
But they were small, and oh my goodness, those things were good.
That's the thing with that show too, is they just have a bunch of vendors come in. I had one of the best coffees I've ever had was at that show.
Isn't that something?
Just in a little food truck. So that's another great thing about that show, is they have all these vendors that come in and they have really good food. And did you get a chance to walk around the flea market at all?
I did. And the flea market is a huge part of this show. I would say it covers pretty much half the ground.
It's almost as big as the actual car show.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we mentioned in other podcasts that if you're looking for any type of part you can imagine, whether I saw a guy like walking by me with a steering column, had the steering wheel attached to it and the whole, oh my goodness.
Day one, I saw someone lugging a bumper.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what are the odds?
To be seen for sure, but that is a huge part of this show and people look forward to that. So we ended up on Saturday leaving the show. It wasn't raining. Everything looked pretty cool. They had the parade of cars, which they do, and then they have a dance in the middle of the street in Waterbury, Vermont. Didn't think anything of it. We knew we would be back there on Sunday morning. Came back on Sunday morning, and oh boy, did we see some flooding.
Yeah.
Apparently there was a downpour. We talked with some of the local yokels and some of the vendors at the event, and they told us around 9 o'clock on Saturday night, the skies opened up and just a monsoon of wet weather for about a 15 to 20 minute period, and that's all she wrote.
Yeah. I think it's tough, too, because I feel like we're a weather podcast now.
Yeah.
It's been so wet in Vermont that it's like every few days it rains, too, even if it's just a little bit.
Yeah.
So the ground stays pretty saturated. So, it didn't take much for that to flood. And apparently there were people pushing so there's people there that stay there in their campers and things like that. So there's people pushing water off our tent because it kept pooling up on part of the tent, and it still ended up ripping the tent a little bit.
Our Sport Car USA shirts got a little damp, but it ended up being a very humid day, so we laid them out on the chairs to dry. And I felt so bad for the flea market people in particular. They were down below.
Yeah.
And down below, we had told you about the flooding that we had maybe 3 to 4 weeks ago in Vermont, and they told us that during that flooding period, there were depths of 8 to 10 feet where these flea market people were this weekend.
Wow.
Last weekend. We get there, there's mud everywhere, and pretty much people saying, don't go any further. You won't get out. We look down below, and we see the flea market people, many of them, they are engulfed in water. All of their items are flooded.
Floating away.
They've got their boots on. They're trying to salvage whatever they can do. The staff at the VAE did a wonderful job helping them out, but it was a sad situation. It really was.
Yeah, it's there. I know that's where the car corral is too.
Yeah.
I saw some pictures of like the porta potties that were down in that area too. Just complete, like you couldn't open the door. They were flooded right up against.
No, you don't want to go in there. Even try to go in there.
No,
they were definitely flooded.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the car corral. That's where they sell vehicles. You can bring your personal vehicle and try to sell it that weekend. It was. Just how much more can these people take? How much more can the people here in the North Country take with all this water?
I know, and like we said, it's raining today, it's raining tomorrow, so we're really hoping next week is good enough for.
And we were there most of the day on Sunday until late afternoon. The water didn't really recede much at all, and a lot of flea market vendors left early if they could get out.
Right,
because you mentioned many stay overnight. They had their campers, and trying to get a camper through mud and water is not an easy thing.
No.
So, all in all, it was a very good time. We made the best of it.
Talked to a lot of cool people.
We did talk to a lot of people. We want to run some of those interviews now, and we hope you enjoy them. It was a very good time. It was the 66th annual Vermont Auto Enthusiast Auto Antique and Classic Meet, and we'll be back there again next year in Waterbury, Vermont. All right, tell us your name, where you're from.
Fred Viennes in Facein, Vermont.
Tell us about this GMC truck.
It's a Chevy.
Tell us about this Chevy truck.
I bought it in 1995 from a guy that drove it back here from Utah, restored it, and restored it again a few years ago. But I use it every day in the summer for my vehicle. So.
What drove you to this type of vehicle?
I never had a preference on make. I always, whatever I liked that came along, I would take advantage of it.
What condition was it in when you bought it?
It was pretty rust-free, but it was a work truck, so it was pretty beat up.
I notice you have a logo on it, Shepherd's Brook Auto. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
That's my company, small two-man body shop that I run at home. So,
have you done any modifications to the truck?
It has a modern fuel-injected engine in it.
Okay. What year is it again?
72.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to tell us about it?
No, I can't think of anything particular. But
All right.
it's special to me because I got it the year my daughters were born, so
Very nice.
I'm going to keep it forever.
Okay, give us your full name and where you're from.
Chris Barbieri from Worcester, Vermont.
Chris, you're a member of the Vermont Auto Enthusiasts. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's our club. It's been, I think, since 1953 it was founded, and we've got about 300 members. And we do a lot of things in the club with our cars and just keep them going. We love them.
You're not only one of the organizers of this great event in Waterbury, Vermont, but you also have a car or two.
I do. Actually, I've got 5 collector cars, but this one at the show today is a 1965 Barracuda, which I've had for about 20 years.
How'd you find it? Did you do anything to it?
I found it, of all places, in Niagara Falls, Ontario, and brought it across the border and brought it home. And actually, I haven't done much to it at all. What you see is what you get with this car. It's a 283 high performance out of the factory with a 4-speed. And it's in the garage most of the time, of course.
What are the other vehicles that you own?
Oh boy, I'm a Mopar guy. They're all mid-60s, early 60s, mid-60s. I've got a 63 Valiant station wagon, which is rare and in really incredibly nice condition, and a 64 Valiant convertible. The 65 Barracuda. I've got another 66 Barracuda, and I've got a 67 Barracuda convertible.
I'd say so. You're Mopar all the way.
All the way, and I got a garage big enough to put them in, so I'm happy.
How long have you been a member of the Vermont Automobile Enthusiasts?
I would say 35 to 40 years. I'd have to go back and look exactly when, but I've been here for a long time in the club, and I love the club and love this show every year.
It's been a rainy summer so far. We're keeping our fingers crossed, even though we're getting some rain now.
I think we're getting used to rain and having official events broken down and we couldn't do it any longer or whatever. So, we're used to the weather.
What got you into the automobile collecting?
I think it was when my father gave up his 1953 Plymouth. I got it, and I started messing with it, and I put a V8 in it, and so on and so forth. And after that, I had friends when I was in school that had some really old cars in the 20s and 30s, and we used to drive around in those things, and beat them up and stuff. But that started it, and now I have a passion for it, like everybody here pretty much has a passion for the old cars.
Any cars that you used to have that you wish you had back?
Yeah, my uncle had a Dodge Charger in 1971, and when he passed away, that came to me, and I had it for a number of years, and I don't know, I wake up every morning and say to myself, why did I sell that car?
I think we've all been there.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
All right. Okay, if you could just tell us your names and where you're from.
Malcolm McNair,
Dana McNair.
From?
Langgrove, Vermont.
Okay, we've got a 1909 Cadillac. I'm guessing you guys are not the original owners.
No.
No.
You had to think about that one for a little bit.
Well, original, how old?
Yeah, right. Tell us about your 1909 Cadillac.
It's a Model 30, which means 30 horsepower. Demi-tonneau, which has a narrower back seat than a touring car. So it's known as the sport touring of the day. It's the first year for 4-cylinder, 09. And they used the same engine up through 1916, but got a little bigger each year.
How long have you owned it?
Well, I married into it in 80-something, but Malcolm's dad was very passionate about saving old cars from the scrap drive, so he bought it, in 42? The story goes, if you had $20 in a barn and you knew Bob McNair, you probably were going to get a call about a car. So he bought this car. He'd been actually chasing the car for a while. It lived in Madison, New Hampshire. It was the postal car. And it got put away. There was a family tragedy. The guy put it in the barn and didn't want to sell it and didn't want to do anything. And finally sold it to Malcolm's dad back then, charged him like $25 plus $2 for the gas in the tank.
So it was a true barn find. How many years have you owned it?
Since 67, when he passed it to me. And then in 84, we restored it to drive off on our wedding in it.
How did you restore it? Was it something that you did yourself, or did you do it piecemeal?
It's something we did ourselves. I had the paint done by a body shop, but everything else, and it was before internet, so it was much harder to find parts.
I think I heard you say that it goes not over 40, right?
Yeah, it's really, really happy at 38. So yeah, that's a perfect speed for it. So.
How often do you take it out?
This year it's been out 3 times. It's driven across the country once on multiple day tour. And it goes to a lot of car shows.
Do you have the complete history on it? How many owners?
We are the third owner, and well, I'm the fourth owner. My dad's the third, and he knew the second owner, but don't know who the first one was.
Heard a lot of stories about vehicles like this that the younger generation, if you will, they aren't interested in these type of vehicles. Why is that?
Probably because they're too slow.
And they're fussy. You have to know a lot to be able to work on a brass car. And you have to know a lot of other brass car guys who will build things specifically for cars. It's not like you can just go to the auto parts store and buy the parts you need. So it's tricky.
When did the first Cadillac come out?
1901 was the first year, and they had both 1- and 2-cylinder cars for a couple of years, and this is their first year for the 4-cylinder.
What's the future hold for this vehicle?
It goes down another generation.
Yeah, nice.
Yep.
So we have 2 sons. Both of them like it, but one of them has earned his spot because he was the navigator on the 2009 cross-country drive. So he sat with his mom all the way to California, earning his ownership of this car.
Very nice. Can we hear the horn?
Yeah. I'll make your sound meter go.
That's very cool, very cool. Okay, you want to tell us about the original Cadillac or how it got started?
So the developer of Cadillac, his name was Henry Leland. He was from Barton, Vermont. He was an amazing man. Not a big name in the world, but a really important guy in the world of manufacturing and of automotive history. Delco, Detroit Electric Company, was Henry Leland. Lincoln was Henry Leland. Prior to getting into cars, he changed manufacturing. He changed the standard of within 500ths of an inch to within 1,000ths of an inch, and it was that type of thinking that helped him win the Dewar's Cup, which was a very prestigious British award that was given to high levels of manufacturing. And what he did was ship 3 Cadillacs over to England, and his whole deal was a part off of Cadillac A will fit on Cadillac C with no problem. And at that point, nobody manufactured like that. Every car was hand-built. Pieces were built to that car. And Henry Leland was like, that doesn't make sense. We should be able to pull a part off of this car and put it on this car and drive the car. So for the Dewar's Cup, they took those cars, they disassembled them, and then the mechanics went in, grabbed the parts they needed, built 3 cars, and drove them around the track. And everybody who'd ever competed for the Dewar's Cup looked at that and went, there's no way, there's no way. And that's how he won that amazing award way back in the day.
And he was born and raised in Vermont?
Born and raised in Vermont, yeah. Got his start. I used to have one of those hand hair clippers, the one where you squeeze it and the blades go together. And I used to have one of those because that's where he got his start in manufacturing. He worked for the company, for the guy who made those clippers. And it was those clippers where he went, why can't we make these more precise? And the guy's like, well, yeah, you can't do it. And he's like, can we try? So
he seems like a practical guy that probably didn't want a lot of recognition.
He didn't. He's not a name that most people know. But when you look him up and you learn about him, you go, how is it that he's not more famous? He's the son of Barton. And years ago, Barton did a Guinness World Book Records attempt at the most Cadillacs in one line driving, because we lost that record. It went to Holland. And the woman in Barton was like, well, that's not okay. Holland can't own the Cadillac record. So they put out the call and they thought, well, maybe we'll get like 180, 200 Cadillacs. Well, there were about 400 of us that day. Drove from Barton down to Tunbridge around the fairgrounds, and we owned that record big time.
Well, we have people listening and watching all over the country. Barton, Vermont is not a big place.
No, it's mostly farms and maybe one village store.
There you go. See all these famous people we never knew about that live in Vermont.
I know.
In the hills.
Yeah.
In the hills. Thank you, guys. That was awesome. All right, give us your full name and where you're from.
Gary Chapman from Randolph, Vermont.
Gary, you not only brought 1 car to the Waterbury car show, you brought 3. Tell us about them.
It was hard to drive them all here at once, but no. But my friend and a dentist friend of mine, he drives this every year. We've been coming for a lot of years. I've had this for 39 years. It came up from Texas. I was living in Baltimore at the time.
What year and make and model?
73 Triumph TR6, and the last of the metal bumper. They went to 74, they went to the rubber bumpers. No rust, things in really great shape. And
what drew you to this car?
My wife. She found out when we got married in '84 that I've had MGBs before.
What's the history on this one?
This year after we got married, she says, "Why don't you find a British car?" So it happened to be a paper somebody left in my business, and it had this in there. So I went and got it. The guy was transferred from Texas and into Virginia, and I was living in Baltimore, and so I went down and got it, and they were going for about $5,200. I got it for $4 because it needed a clutch, and clutches back then were costing that. But I did it myself, take the interior out, and she's never given me any of the electronic problems that they said. I never have to top up oil, never have to do anything.
Any modifications, or do you try to get your cars as perfect as the original can be?
I like original, but I put Monza exhaust on it, which is dual because I did have headers. So I put dual exhaust on it, and I had it all underneath, all the brakes, everything redone, and the pipes and all the hoses. Everything's been redone on this.
All right, let's walk over to your black Porsche.
Then back in
Car number 2.
I decided.
1 second there, Jerry.
So I was looking for about 6 months, and I wanted black on black, original paint, and low mileage. And after looking for about 6 months, I found this, and I stole it. The thing, I got it for $12,000.
How long have you had it?
12 years. 12 years. It's insured now for 80. It's and so the thing's all original paint. It runs great. The only thing I've done to it is had the RPM motors. I had the transmission. I had the clutch replaced, and that was it.
Pretty fast?
Yeah, it's not a turbo, but it's fast, and the handles like you can't believe. The Porsches just take those turns really, really great. It's a great, great car. I love it.
All right, let's walk over to you.
My wife's mom passed last year, '99, and she was always giving her time to her mom. So when her mom passed, she said, "Mom said I ought to have a Volkswagen Beetle convertible."
Here it is, right?
So I found it a month later, and we bought this about 6 months ago. And since then, I put disc brakes on it. Had to put new headers on. There's a guy named John's Car Corner down in Westminster, Vermont, and he helped me put that in. He showed me how to do everything. I put new headers, new clutch, new pressure plate. I've got disc brakes, all new bushings. Everything's been rebuilt on it. So.
You said this came from your mother-in-law?
No. My mother-in-law wanted one. So when the mother-in-law passed, and my wife said, "I want to start going to car shows," but she never, in the 38 years we've been married, she's never driven either one of these.
Okay.
She said, "I want a Beetle."
Yeah. What's the history on the Beetle?
Don't know. I got it from down in Pennsylvania, and they delivered it, and it was a good price. I got a good deal, and but it needed a lot of work, and I've done it. She's running really good now. So.
Any other special cars at home?
She has a BMW GT, and I have a Tacoma. Very good pickup. I like it. Yeah. We live in Randolph. So.
Okay, so out of the 3 cars here, which one's your favorite?
Technically the Porsche, but lately I've been driving. It's my wife's car, but I've been driving it a lot because I've been test driving it and making sure everything's running right. So this gets everybody. What I like about this one is no matter where you go, everybody says, "Oh, I have one of those." Growing up, I had 1 or 2. Everybody's had one of these, and it's the old piece. And if you see with the hat, I had about 6 of these in the 60s and 70s, and I had 2 split window buses, which I love. I would have one. If I had more room at home, I'd have a bus.
Right. Go for it. All right, tell us your first name, where you're from.
Jim Adams, Brooklyn, Connecticut, and this is my wife, Lynn.
Hi, Jim and Lynn. Thank you for doing an interview with us. Tell us all about this car.
Well, I knew of this car when I was a lad, and I told the young lady that owned it I would like to buy it someday. Well, 40 years later, that day came. I got the car, we took it home, we had it in the garage for a month, and the telephone rang. It was the young lady that sold me the car. She said the kids are lonesome, they want the car back, they want to ride in the rumble seat, and Dick won't talk to me anymore. Can I have the car back? So, one spring day, there was no salt on the roads. My wife and I took the car over to her house, put it in the barn, and covered it up with the car cover. 3 weeks later, the telephone rang. She wanted to know what I was doing that day. And I said, why? She said, do you think you could bring the car over? I said, have you been in the barn lately, Nancy? And she said, no. I said, why don't you go look? So she called me back. She said, when did you do that? I said, oh, Lynn and I brought it over a couple of weeks ago. 4 years later, I saw her again. Well, I saw her all the time. And I said to her one day, you're going to sell me the coupe today? She says, yep, come get it tonight. I went over and got the car, brought it home, and she says, you register it tomorrow and you keep it forever. And we've had it ever since. We've had it 25 years or so.
So did the price change from the first time she sold it to you, then you sold it back to her, and then you bought it again?
No, she gave it to us for the same price.
And I'd imagine you sold it to her for the same price that you bought it from originally.
Sure, yeah. And since then, I've taken it over to her house so she could see it, and I believe she's, 92?
Some between 92 and 95, somewhere.
Yeah, I believe she's 92 years old now.
Well, I'm sure it must be pretty special when she sees this car.
Oh, my goodness gracious. She comes out and she talked for an hour about it, And we are the third owner. It was sold brand new, 2 miles from our house, and here's the bill of sale.
All right. We're getting the bill of sale. Here it is.
It was sold at Haywood's Garage in Moosup, Connecticut for $525. The rumble seat was $25 extra, and they allowed the man $75 for a Chevrolet touring car toward it. That garage later became Delaney Motors, and I was a Ford salesman for Delaney Motors.
How were you drawn to this type of car?
Brought up with them. My dad had them, but you don't know what what he did with them. He bobbed the fenders, put roll bars in them, slapped a number on them, put them on a racetrack. So very few of these survive.
How much work have you had to do to it?
Nothing. All I did was work on the engine, get it running, and that was it. And I did swap engines, come to think of it. I did swap engines. The other one was getting tired, and I found this one in Royalton, Vermont, as a matter of fact, at this meet a few years ago. And we went up and got the motor and put it in and been driving it ever since. And we enjoy it immensely.
Okay, just give us your first name, where you're from.
Jim Bullock. We just moved here from Colorado to New Hampshire.
Jim, what do you have here at the Waterbury Car Show?
71 Ford Bronco. It's been a heck of a lot of work, about 10 years restoring it. And it's just about there. It's just finishing touches at this point.
Where did you find it? What's the history?
We found it in Colorado. It was full life Colorado until we moved here. I bought it from someone in 2011 for about $3,000. It was in pretty sad shape. About 6 months later, started disassembling it and been working on it ever since.
So you're doing all the work yourself?
Everything but the paint and the more difficult body.
So before we get into the mechanical aspects of this vehicle, tell us about this amazing red color.
It's Brandywine candy over metallic silver. So it's pretty bright when you look at it in the sun. When you look down the side, it kind of fades to a black. It's just the nature of the paint. The more shades or more layers you put on, the darker the paint gets. It's very, very nice paint, but difficult to take care of.
And how did you find out about this particular paint?
When we were having the body work done, we were researching paint for about almost a full year before we finally found this and decided that was the way to go. My wife actually picked it out. She would let you know that for sure. But yeah, about a year of looking at paint chips until we found it.
I'd say your wife knows what she's talking about and what she wants.
She's got good taste.
I'd say so. So tell us about the mechanics of this vehicle.
Sure. So it's a 351 out of a 94 Ford pickup. It's all custom built. It's custom built fuel injection. The top end is out of a 94 Ford Lightning. The transmission is a 4R70W out of a 98 Ford Explorer. Again, modified. The fuel injection, custom built, but it's all based on Ford parts. It's all custom code, custom built, wire harness, the whole bit. Axles, they're the stock housings. They've been upgraded with larger shafts and better diffs. Stock transfer case that's been slightly modified, heavy duty outputs on it.
Horsepower?
It's somewhere in the range of 400.
Do anything to the interior?
That's where we have the finishing touches. So it does have carpet, door panels, seats. The back seat needs to be recovered in the right material to match the front, and we're going to do a headliner.
Is this one of the first car shows you've been at? Do you go to several?
We did several in Colorado last year. Last year was our first year showing it. This is our second car show since we moved out here.
We welcome you to Vermont, and the question I have for you is, how does Colorado compare to Vermont?
I like it out here more. Colorado's getting a bit overrun.
Okay, tell us your name and where you're from.
My name is Carl Hamel, and I'm from the Victoriaville, Quebec.
With that accent, I was guessing Vermont accent.
Oh, no, I don't have the accent of Vermont, yes.
All right, we're at the Waterbury Car Show, and you brought a Thunderbird. Tell us all about this beautiful Thunderbird.
Thank you. It's the 64. The color is the Simon Corral, and I rebuilt this car. It is 2020, 1 year and a half for the rebuild, frame off, and all the car is very nice.
A complete restoration. How long have you owned it? Since 20 or beyond that?
I'm an owner. It's 1982. But I have the young baby and just storage the car and go back. I possessed 5 Thunderbird last year here with my 67 gray Corral. Charcoal Corral. Charcoal. I win here too.
Very nice. Yeah. You've had 5 Thunderbirds?
Yes, 5.
Which one's your favorite?
Oh, I love my 67. 67 is very... I possess 2 58 convertible. Ford built 12 134 only for the convertible in 68, and I have one. And the 64, 67, 72, and 2002.
Did you get any of them from the United States, or are they all from Canada?
A big pardon?
All the vehicles you've owned, the 5 Thunderbirds, were they all from Canada, or were they from the United States?
This one is the United States, but my 72 going to Washington. And the third one, only Canada.
So, Scott Nickerson from Sport Car USA, thank you very much. We want to thank everybody for listening to our Test Drive podcast. I'm Lee Bodette, your host. Be sure to check out our Test Drive series on YouTube. We'll see you next time on our next Test Drive podcast. And remember, let's never forget the men and women serving this great country of ours. Goodbye, everybody.